Felinids of the Militarum Auxilia. Lore and commentary will begin after a brief story to get us in the mood and show us what is to be discussed. From the Bald Library, Scratch and Sniff. It was rare. Very Militarum Auxilia. They were of the 73, and not high up the list of purity either. Most of the time, these things were in a form of semi-quarantine. I remember when I read the orders assigning some of them to my theatre. It was like someone threw a cup of cold vomit right in my face. We'd fought hard for months, held ground none could have dreamed stable. No air support was possible, but the most blatant, and thus the least useful in this scenario. We'd not been reinforced for all that time. Resupplied, of course, but not rotated out. We were supposed to have been overrun weeks ago, according to wide-eyed convoy men. Top brass could not believe it. So they dared not cycle us out. We'd been the only units able to hold them at the tree line. And this was the most horrible of postings. Jungle warfare. They came at any time, odd times, all the time. Wave after wave of them. All would be still, but never silent, of course. There was always a cacophony going on in that damned jungle. Then, out of nowhere, a scream would rent the air, and then they'd all bellow that horrific war cry of theirs before hurling themselves at us time and again. If we broke them, they always came back. If they hit us, they made bloody bits of our lines before we withdrew, formed up, and drew up new firing lines and cut them down with volleys. We lost the 13th, 15th and 19th before we learnt to do the unpalatable. So, sometimes we even fired into their melee and hit our own. But if we didn't, they simply charged the next block of us and repeated the carnage. We lost the 17th due to hesitancy. Never again. We fought back each time, of course, but they were huge, muscular, fast, ferocious, feral, and deadly. Greenskins. Orcs. They made recon nearly impossible. Most think of them as morons who are little more than animals, but this is not the case. Oh, they're animals, all right, but not dumb ones. But we had to try. We had to know if they were mustering and in how many numbers. We tried, but this was their realm. Close, violent, personal. The scouts we sent out into that jungle rarely came back, and never with their full complements. Vicious spike traps, ambushes, all resulting in attrition too high to risk our scouts, but it was too important not to use them. All of this, for months. And they had sent us a regiment of Auxilia. A mere few thousand, and the men would not like it. Not one bit. Or so I thought. We all did. But they also sent heavier firepower to fortify our positions. Many more guns for box barrages. Many mines. Many heavy emplacements. It looked like they wanted us to dig in further and really punish the orcs. We were up for that, of course. But why the Auxilia, then? They arrived by chimera convoy like any other outfit, but they kept to themselves and disembarked straight into their camp zone. Commissars were patrolling the entry points into their section of the camp, keeping all away from them. At this point, nobody knew who or what they were. We just knew they were Auxilia scum. We dug in, as instructed, and the commissars called a mass meeting to discuss the newcomers' duties. shocked. We were told these poor blighters would be exclusively going out as our new recon duty, and their remit was not to find the enemy and record report and then retreat. No, they were to goad the enemy into the camp's enhanced defences. They were supposed to go out to purposefully anger the greenskins. High Command had conceived that we would be able to punish them and truly get to grips with their numbers. If we could drain their forces enough, their numbers brought down, they could be containable, and then Command could go back on the attack. Then I was escorted to their encampment to view the fighting men and women they had sent us for this suicidal mission. I was prepared to have to hold my gorge, to then wash my hands when I got back to my quarters to wipe away the filth. Yet when I saw them, they were not like anything I had ever witnessed before. My escort was a set of commissars that looked like they ate their own kind for breakfast. Hard men, even amongst the elite of the Schola Progenium. These were the commissars that would execute an entire company with their own hand, rather than see even one of them retreat. And then I saw them, stood to perfect attention, rank upon rank of them. They looked so much like us at a distance that I was relaxed when I came closer, and instead of fearing them, I viewed them more as a curio, an oddity. They snapped a simultaneous salute every bit as sharp as my own men. They were rigid, disciplined, well-trained, at least in this regard. I could only hope that they would be as effective as my own men, but I could not see how they would survive in that terrain against that enemy. Jungles filled with greenskins, feral orcs, for none of them were particularly big. None could make it into a grenadier formation, is what I thought then. Each was wiry, barely a scrap of fat on any of them when I went in for closer inspection. Each had a short, downy set of fur across every inch of them. I had worked with feral world regiments before, but this was not being unkempt or shaggy. They had fur on their faces. Their eyes, that was the worst of it. Those slits instead of circles in the middle of their orbs, it made them feel more different than they were in any other regard. Even when one answered my bitten-off question and revealed their sharp teeth and huge canines, it was still the eyes that were the most disconcerting. Like being watched by a dragon or another otherworldly predator. But they acted just like my own men, at least while I was present. When I discussed their position and duties with their commissars, I expected sneers and shrugs, or even outright rebellion. But no, I was shocked to be told that they knew their role, and were looking forward to taking the fight to the Xenos scum. I shook my head, for despite their hard exteriors, these commissars quite obviously did not know what they were talking about. How could they? To be so blasé about their orders, for they spelt certain death. Again, so I thought. It was the first engagement that wiped away my concerns, and after the third, I was not even concerned about them being in the same camp anymore, and certainly not for their safety out there in the perpetual green of the jungle. They were simply amazing. I learned to never question High Command again, for they must have been divinely moved to give us such warriors. They were gifts from the Emperor himself. For these Felinids, they went out there, hiding in the trees, crouching in long grasses, darting in and out of shade and shadow, while the orcs tried to get closer to our fortifications so we could not order massed bombardments without hitting ourselves. The Felinids danced around them like they were Grok's cattle herds. Time and again we witnessed the Felinids come running back to our lines and diving over the embankments and palisades even. Their speed and agility were terrifying to behold. And every time they darted home, they dragged huge mobs of orcs with them, directly onto our well-prepared firing lines. The slaughter was soul-enriching, life-affirming. Often they would then go out again to check that the full extent of the orcs had been destroyed. Entire carpets of twitching greenskins lay before our ramparts. We sent out details to clear and cremate them, always while being watched over by our Felinid allies. Over the next weeks, the haul from each goading party of Felinids became thinner, and finally, their officers asked if they could coordinate large sweeps into the jungle to take the fight to the orcs. And with them watching over us, supporting us, drawing smaller groups of orcs into well-prepared traps, the amount of heads we had taken was the envy of the entire army. Despite their strange genetics, these warriors were the toast of the camp near every night. We were winning this war now, because of a mere 2,000 of them. The only oddity that I ever could not quite compromise was that they never, ever had any fires in their camp, and when they ate, it was never, ever with us. But some things are best left alone. In the Guard, if it is not a problem, then it isn't a concern. We have wars to win. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and faces of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be taking a brief look into an element of the Militarum Auxilia, and specifically Homo sapiens hirsutus, of the planet Carlos McConnell, the Felinids. But first, let us get a basic comprehension of what that means. For most with even a passing knowledge of the Imperium of mankind are aware that it is, as oft touted, the most barbaric regime imaginable. Well, for humans anyway. Let's not dwell on the Drukhari of the Dark City or the horrors of the Chaos Lords. And as such, any form of deviation from the norm is not just frowned upon or derided, but most often actively sought out and quashed. Although exterminated with great prejudice is far closer to correct terminology. Now, this is not just based in ignorance and superstition, although they have a hefty part to play in the reasoning for such annihilations. For many forget that during Old Night, the period where the old human Star Federation fell and the coming of the Imperium, there were thousands of years of darkness, where humanity was near pushed into extinction. Alien races saw the weakness of humanity and fell upon us, enslaving, exterminating, or even farming entire populations of humans for faith or food. But either way, sustenance. In the grim darkness of the far future, it is not simply illogical rage that makes the Imperium so dangerous. It is the racial memory of having Xenos boots on human throats. The Great Crusader found so many human colonies either utterly destroyed or placed under the thrall of truly terrible beings. There is no wonder that this shock, the viewing and then collating of so many instances of atrocities, burned itself onto the memory of humanity. And this was then reflected in how they treated others, aliens especially. For in the initial waves of the Great Crusade, there were races who were left alone and even offered protectorate status if they were of use and were not guilty of being a threat or a historic enemy of humanity. But as the crusade went on, even these tiny slithers of clemency were finally eradicated. For there really is only so much a man or woman can take before their hearts grow cold. Their rage is initiated, and vengeance is the only thing that they can consider. But how does this pertain to the current subject? Well, it has to be noted that humanity tried many things in the periods between its golden age of technology and the rising of the Emperor, thousands of years later. For the warp was filled with storms and travel was largely impossible outside of brief windows of opportunity that never lasted long. And the worst of all wars since that between the Necrons and the Old Ones had blasted much of the galaxy and destroyed so much of the power base of humanity, its technology. Perhaps it was the cybernetic rebellion that required the assistance of alien races to defeat them that was used as a backdrop to the assaults on humanity in that period. It is impossible to state for certain, but the unleashing of the cybernetic rebellion could well give a cause. Hence, colonies that survived this rebellion and were cut off from the galactic empire of humanity were suddenly left adrift in the Sea of the Void, without supply, support, or succor from the rest of the race. So when enemies came, they had little recourse but desperation, and she is the mother of all innovations. Hence, over the period, many human strains broke off from the genetic baseline, and these were dubbed abhumans, still humans, but not entirely of the standard. Some strains were due to environmental circumstances, as with Homo sapiens gigantus being ogrins, or Homo sapiens minimus, the ratlings, who would not be out of place offering a wizard a good day on a fine morn. Yet this is not the case for all abhumans. Some humans were changed to a warp taint, becoming mutants, and this was barely tolerated by even the Crusade. Then, as time went on, the Imperium no longer needed their manpower for its wars, so they were often butchered. Not all, but many. And now they are an underclass in some worlds, but most just get rid of them. Now this is mainly due to the belief that they may be tainted and thus unloved by the Emperor is the party line, but it is those at the top tier of society who may be permitted to know about chaos and that are motivated by this knowledge to wipe out mutants. But the difference between a mutant and an abhuman is significant. For mutants have children that can be utterly different to themselves, with no consistency of what traits are passed on to the next generation. It is simply the roll of a dice, and results can be terrifying. In the case of abhumans, they may well be different to humans, but they are a stable genetic variant. So if an ogrin breeds with another ogrin, they produce an ogrin. And the abhumans are not well treated at all, but are considered at least human. As I was saying, many forms of abhumans are due to environment, but others are due to genetic engineering. It could be for a myriad of reasons, to change humans so that they could thrive on a planet simply not suited to us, or sometimes it would be to provide advantages that improve their performance in battle against all assailants. With the Felinids, Homo sapiens hirsutus, it is clear that their genetics were altered and elements of Terran felines, or cats, were blended in. As such, they have exceptional agility, endurance, speed, and very acute senses. They are able to perform feats of acrobatics that are closer to Eldar than human, and have a soft covering of fur over their entire bodies, even their faces, and of course, extended canines and sharp teeth. They are known to come from only one world in the galaxy, the planet Carlos McConnell. Usually, they are semi-quarantined, the Imperium acknowledging that they exist, but keeping them hidden like a dirty secret, as many abhumans are. Of the many strains of abhumans discovered in the Great Crusade and the Age of the Imperium, only 73 of them now exist, with tens of these strains teetering on the brink of extinction. And the Imperium will not usually take much interest in supporting those on the way out. Why should they, when the worlds they populate could then be filled with true, pure strain humans? With the exception of the most prolific and very close to human ogrin and ratlings, generally other abhumans are left to their own devices, and it is exceptionally rare to encounter one outside of their home system. Yet, as with all of the Imperium, it is so huge, has existed for so long, that there are occasional members of this abhuman race in the darker corners of hives, or spoken of as mythic, but based on very real encounters. And on rare occasions, they are called upon to provide a tithe. There is nothing much on their world of use to the Imperium, so it is presumed that when they are tasked to fulfill their tithe, they do so in manpower, who will swiftly be trained and deployed in the Militarum Auxilia. So now, we must touch on that body. For many trillions of men and women in the Astra Militarum would be deeply offended to be considered similar or of equal worth to the abhumans of the 73. The propaganda used by the Imperium is humanocentric, of course, so the abhumans are treated as subhumans, and this continues into their training. For most abhuman regiments are taught by ministorum priests that they are unworthy, somehow stained by their difference, so that they have guilt ingrained into them at a very deep level. They have to work and sacrifice themselves to the wishes and wars of a god who can be persuaded to forgive them for the crime of their own birth. They need only show fanatical devotion to the Emperor for him to forgive and then love them, as he does the rest of humanity. It can mean that many abhuman regiments are every bit as fanatical as those from Krieg. As they are rare and quite important resources in war, and to make certain that nobody construes them as being equal to humans, they have the Militarum Auxilia. Alas, no matter how devout they are, the Officio Prefectus will send their most hard-bitten and fanatical commissars to lead and watch over these regiments. And often these regiments have the most priests of the imperial cult ministering to them, watching them, and punishing them alongside the commissariat. Yet when they are deployed to a war zone, the deviations that mark them out are what define their increased effectiveness in battle. Hence, the Militarum Auxilia are not just detached due to their special requirements in the chain of command, but also due to their lethality and the requirements to be used in the right way. Although an officer of the Auxilia will most likely not shed a tear for any they lose in combat, they show their devotion to the Emperor by making sure that the skills of their units are not squandered, not simply thrown away as a first wave of any assault, bullet absorbers and the like. It is a difficult line to walk, and can be the cause of tension between wings of the Astra Militarum if particularly truculent and dense officers are in charge of the campaign. The Felinids themselves are not well documented, and there are only brief notes from a rogue trader who discussed them with a Kroot of all things. Nothing has really been stated about their culture, history, or way of life. So hopefully, this will be a nice surprise one year, when Games Workshop decide to get their finger out and provide more options in the Astra Militarum range. For I have often wanted to start an Imperial Guard army and convert a few squads to Felinids, to go with my Scots, Ogrins and Rattlings. Perhaps I will even throw in a few Longshanks, Neandors or Goliaths. But that is definitely a subject for another day, and another video. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed this video, then do consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell, as I would not want you to miss out. You can support the ongoing work by joining the Patreon if you are in a benevolent mood. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.